I will begin. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to have you with us here. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you who are following us online, depending on where you are. This is our second to last press briefing on the second to last day of the Assembly, and the focus today is hope. The theme of the day is One Hope, and I'm Arne Danielsson. I'm the head of communications for the LWF, and I have with me our keynote speaker today, Archbishop Emerita Antje Jacquelin, who gave us a very inspiring keynote speech, I think, and Bishop Pavlo Schwartz from Ukraine, who responded to that with some concrete examples, I think. The format will be the same as we have had in recent days. I'm going to ask them a couple of questions, and then I will open it up to the representatives of the media who are here, and with the help of my colleague Thierry, also to those who are following us online. So, Archbishop, can I still use that title, Archbishop, or is it Archbishop Emerita?
Good question. Well, it formally is Archbishop Emerita, but when I was in Germany, somebody said, yeah, we call you still Frau Erzbischöfin, for we don't say Frau Bundeskanzlerin AD.
Very good. Then I will say Archbishop Jacquelin. Where do you see signs of hope today?
Where do I see signs of hope today? In a sense, everywhere, but I also miss signs of hope almost everywhere, because we are living in a time where the question of hope, of a credible hope, looms large. It's behind most of the pressing issues, the challenges we are facing in our societies, in our churches, as humankind. The question of hope is really large. And we also have a lot of fear around. And I think the combination of groping for hope or too little hope and too much fear is actually a very dangerous combination, because it makes people do, to put it simply, stupid things. And I think if you listen to my talk, you heard me speak about these 5 poisonous P's of polarization, populism, protectionism, post-truth, and patriarchy. And behind all of those is, in a sense, a fear of the other, fear of the future, fear of change, fear of loss, and I would say too little hope, because hope to me is actually that which liberates you to act, even if it is costly, but it liberates you to act. It's not just, oh, I don't know, that's why I hope. It's not that. It's really an energy, to say an energy of the Holy Spirit. You want brief answers, huh?
We have time. It's fine. We have plenty of time. Brief or long, we will. It's all good. Just to pick up on what you were saying now, I'd be curious to sort of, what would you see as the relationship between, maybe first, what is the antithesis of hope, and how would you see? Well, let's begin there, and then I have possibly a follow-up question. It depends on your answer.
I had a passage in my talk about what hope is not, and I spent some time on optimism, making the difference that optimism extrapolates from what we know, whereas hope actually is spotting the promise. It's not so much future, more advent, for those of you who are theologians who will understand that. I also said it's not stoicism, because you could think, because in our world, in our life, we all can look back on hopes that were disappointed, deceived, and then say, rather than being disappointed, I would rather not hope. I think that doesn't come easily to us as humans, because I think the Romans were right at some point, dum spiro spiro, as long as I breathe, I have a hope. But still, you could find Stoicism is appealing, because if you don't invest in hope, then you're not going to be disappointed. But how viable is that? I mean, if I don't invest in love, I'm not going to be disappointed. Well, how meaningful is a loveless life? So that's not an option. Fatalism, what happens is not a good option either, because it leaves us without energy to really face the poly crisis. And I also said it's not utopia, because utopia means literally no place, but hope has a place, namely in the messy middle of life, as theologian Rita Nakashima Brock put it.
Then comes the follow-up question. Do we have a crisis of indifference in modern society, where people possibly feel too overwhelmed to actually care and engage?
I don't know that I would say it's a crisis of indifference. It's rather a crisis of fragmentation, of being fragmented. It is the crisis of individualism. It is a spiritual crisis. I mean, in the society where I come from, in Sweden, people have been sort of taught, we have gotten over this with religion. We don't really need it. Because if everybody gets a decent education and they have a decent material standard, and they will automatically develop into mature, democratic, tolerant, helpful human beings. And we are realizing that is not happening. And we are realizing that the young generation is actually very challenged. This mental health theme, this theme of mental health that came up as well in the Q&A period after my talk, I mean, that is really real. So I think, and speaking of signs of hope, that even in my society, I think there's a growing awareness that, for instance, the climate crisis, it's not just about ecology and economy and social sustainability. It's also a spiritual crisis which calls out for spiritual sustainability. And we're a little like groping and searching what that might mean and how we would address that.
Thank you very much. Turning to you, Bishop Schwartz, and now I will have to rely on our interpreter because my language skills do not extend to your languages, unfortunately. I would like to ask you, in Ukraine, is it difficult to talk about hope today?
So maybe the bishop will just speak in Ukrainian, and I will be interpreting into the microphone.
Okay. Ну, з нашої української перспективи, напевно, я надіюсь, ви розумієте, чому, розмовляючи про надію, ми будемо менше говорити про теорію.
So I think you would understand that speaking about hope in Ukraine, we will rather talk about practical side of hope rather than theoretical.
Для того, що коли ти зустрічаєшся з питанням життя і смерті, то питання надії є досить практичним.
Because when you are facing the questions of life and death, hope becomes very practical.
Тобто це, звичайно, це якби сила, і, звичайно, ми говоримо про неї і говоримо про зв'язок між надією та Христом.
And of course, when we talk about hope, we talk about also this connection with between hope and Christ.
Зв'язок також надії з фактом жертви Христа.
This hope is also connected to the fact of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
І чудом Воскресіння.
And also the miracle of resurrection.
Це така теологічна, якби складова, звичайно.
That is the theological component to the hope.
Але практично, ну, вона набагато якби важче, бо коли ти говориш якби про надію в конкретному стані, коли людина переживає, чи буде жити далі, чи не буде.
But then it gets more complicated when this faces with reality and the person sees that tomorrow, today they may live or may not.
Іноді ми маємо те відчуття, про яке я сьогодні вже говорив, що відчуття, яке добре віддається такою українським прислів'ям, що ситий голодного не зрозуміє.
And also sometimes we see how this Ukrainian saying that a full person cannot understand the one who is hungry, that we are also faced with.
Тому в часі кризи це якби коли ти є всередині якби такого екзистенціального кризису, це якби інша, якби також перспектива цієї надії.
So when you are in the midst, just in the middle of this crisis, the perspective of this hope becomes different.
Бо питання, від яких можна втікати в часі миру, під час війни якби вже не можна далі.
Because if you can escape from some of these questions during the times of peace, you cannot escape them during the times of war.
Від питання, що ми помремо.
These are the questions like the fact of death,
Можемо втратити близького.
the fact of the possibility of losing some of our family,
Що цей день може бути останнім для нас.
that the day we're living may be the last.
І що ми не знаємо, коли закінчиться війна, і не знаємо також перспективи.
And that we don't know when the war will end and don't know what are the perspectives for the future.
І в такій перспективі мова надії, проповідь надії є необхідною, щоб взагалі жити.
But in these circumstances, the proclaiming of hope is necessary for life.
Тому якби наш контекст трішечки інший.
That's why our context would be slightly different.
Ми намагаємося, власне, якби говорити про надію під час війни.
And we are trying to talk about hope during the war.
Thank you so much. I will come back with questions from me at the end, but I would actually like to open it up to our journalists here. Good. Cornelia, can you? I think Benjamin was first.
Thank you. Benjamin Lassive, journalist from Germany. A question to Archbishop Antje. When you follow the works of Antje Jacqueline during the last years, her speeches, her presentations, and so on, you realize that hope is one of the main topics during the last years. Would you say there is a kind of more interest in the topic of hope in the societies than it was in earlier years, or would you say people are more looking for hope in the end?
That is indeed a very good question. Maybe some of them, they may not really know what they actually are looking for. I mean, if you are caught in this dynamics of not really knowing what to hope for and being pressed by fears of several, and you may not find your way out. But your question makes me recall a situation a number of years ago when I was invited to address it was a gala for business people. It was leaders, business leaders. And they brought me on stage for just like 5 minutes. And there was this little interview. And I found myself saying, you know, nowadays every responsible business leader knows that it's not just about figures, about euros and dollars. We know that it is also about, well, the climate, ecology. It's about social stability, social sustainability. But it is also about existential and spiritual sustainability. And spontaneously, the whole thing applauded. And I was sort of surprised by that, because you wouldn't have expected that, but I think it struck a nerve. And that made me think, yeah, this is where we need to be as theologians, as the church, to try to voice the question and repeat the question over and over again, and where we have answers, we should not be shy to give the answers. And where we don't have answers, we should amplify the questions and raise the questions that are not raised elsewhere, that are sort of unique for us.
Thank you so much, Philip.
Philipp Gessler from Zeitzeichen in Berlin. I have a question for Pavel Schwarz. As we are speaking about hope, would it be for you a sign of hope if the General Assembly here in Krakow would say, we are for weapon delivery to Ukraine because that gives hope to the Ukrainian people?
Якщо можна, я розпочну з такого жарту.
If I can, I will start with a joke.
Незважаючи на те, що я не є військовим генералом,
Even though I'm not a army general,
у мене є, звичайно, військовий досвід,
I have an experience in serving in the army.
Але я дуже часто, в західних країнах чую питання, що я думаю на рахунок зброї.
But oftentimes I hear the question when I'm in the countries in the West, what is my opinion on the weapons?
Воно не змінюється, як було до війни, так і під час війни.
And this opinion never changed since the beginning of the war, now during the war.
Я є послідовним прихильником того права на самозахист.
And I'm sided with that every person has the right to defend themselves.
Але я розумію, що війна не є чимось простим.
However, I realize that war is not a simple matter.
Я не бачу в ній жодної романтики.
There is no romanticism in war.
Але питання, чи надання зброї дає якусь надію?
But answering the question if the provision of weapons gives any hope.
В певному сенсі, напевно, так.
In some sense, I would say yes.
Дає можливість боротися.
Because it gives the opportunity to keep fighting.
У нас є тільки насправді дві перспективи, як народу, так і в церкві.
As the people of Ukraine, also a church, we have only two options.
Ми можемо боротися зараз за незалежність.
We can either fight for our independence.
Або знову стати воїнами Російської імперії, щоб боротися з іншими країнами.
Or eventually become the warriors of the Russian Empire and then fight against other countries.
Така наша історія.
So that's how our history was like.
Тому в цих двох важких виборах перший вибор більш обнадіює мене.
So from these two difficult options, the first option gives me more hope.
На питання, чи я відчуваю надію з доставкою зброї.
So the question is if I feel hopeful when there is weapons being delivered to Ukraine. Is that right? General Assembly. Sorry, there was a little misunderstanding. Якщо Генеральна асамблея буде висловити своє ствердження, що треба доставляти оружие в Україну, то дасть це персонально, взагалі надію.
Насправді, це, тобто ми не очікуємо від Генеральної асамблеї такої заяви.
We are not expecting the assembly to make such a resolution or a statement.
Всесвітня Лютеранська Федерація вже висловлювалась на підтримку в Україні, і цього нам було достатньо.
World Lutheran Federation had already made its statement for the support of Ukraine, and that is quite enough for us.
Буде, напевно, ще якась інформація на рахунок цього.
There will be probably other further information concerning the statements.
Але як церква ми не очікуємо, що там буде конкретно про військову зброю.
But as the church we don't expect the statement have something about the support of weapons or delivery of weapons.
Thank you. Dr. Link, I think, is next.
Thank you, Hans-Georg Link, Germany, Catholic News Agency. Frau Erzbischofin, thank you very much for your wonderful keynote you have given to us. There was an ecclesiological section in it, and I was surprised that in that section you didn't give any ecumenical comment. So I would like to ask you about your concrete hopes for ecumenism between Lutheran churches and especially the Roman Catholic one.
Thank you for that question. I'm aware of that section was very short, and that was basically to the constraints of time. You cannot say everything you want to say in 30 minutes. But when you ask for my hopes for the development between especially the Catholics and the Lutherans, of course, I'm coming from having experienced in 2013 then when From Conflict to Communion, the study document was presented at an LWF meeting, a council meeting, and I have grown into the 5 imperatives in From Conflict to Communion. And I have followed the path to the joint commemoration of the Reformation in Lund, in Sweden, on October 31st, 2016, as sort of the opening of the 500 years commemoration of the Reformation. And of course, it was a huge joy to be the local host for this joint meeting of the leadership of the Lutheran World Federation and Pope Francis and Vatican. And I sensed a strong commitment to ecumenism and to follow up on these 5 imperatives. Really, Pope Francis, after the joint prayer service in the Cathedral of Lund, he was really happy and relaxed when he went to Malmö Arena, where the topic was Together in Hope, actually. Together in Hope, and leading up to this joint intention of Lutheran World Service and Roman Catholic Caritas Internationalis to work closer together. And I'm very happy to say that that intention has actually carried fruit. And at that time in 2016, it was really the intention also to make progress on ministry, the Eucharist, and all of that. What I sense with some years in retrospect is that the theological leg of this sort of dialogue has actually not been as powerful as I would have expected, whereas the diaconal leg has been stronger. So my hope for the future would be that the theological leg becomes at least as strong as the diaconal leg, so that we make progress on these questions of the ministry, of the Eucharist, because we know that there is so much pastoral need in our congregations. And we also know that Pope Francis has a big heart for pastoral ecumenism. So I'm really hoping for progress there.
Thank you so much. I see you. I have 3 people on my list, and I think that means I'm going to close it now. So we sort of honor our times. Jan, you are up next.
Yes, good afternoon. Jan Herbermann, I write for the EPD News Agency based in Geneva. It's a question to Bishop Schwarz. I was wondering whether you can sort of elaborate a little bit more on the way the war has affected your church. So especially how many Lutherans have left the country or were forced to leave the country, let's put it this way. How many of your churches have been damaged or even destroyed? How many of your facilities are still operating? Could you give us some details on the actual impact the war has on your church? And secondly, the outgoing president of the Lutherans said on Thursday, I think, excuse me, that peace is our mission. Peace is the mission of the Lutheran World Federation. Do you think that the Lutheran World Federation and the other churches, the Catholic Church, the other church congregations have done enough, or at least to try to have an impact on a political or peaceful solution of this conflict? In other ways, do you think that the voices of the churches are loud enough? Many thanks.
Я спробую дуже коротко.
I'll try to be brief.
Звичайно, якби війна вплинула на динаміку нашої церкви, інших церков, більших від нас та інших релігійних організацій. Україна полірелігійна країна і секулярна.
So of course the war impacted the dynamics of the religious life in Ukraine, both our church and then churches who are bigger or smaller than ours. And Ukraine is a poly-religious, multi-religious country.
В більшості релігійне життя відродилося як в нашій церкві, так і в інших релігійних організаціях.
And I would say,
навіть під час війни.
During the war, the religious or life of faith has been reborn both in our and other religious organizations.
Ситуація значно складніша на окупованій території, і тому, наприклад, ми зазвичай не коментуємо ситуацію, яка є в громаді, нашій громаді, яка є на окупованій території.
Of course, the situation is much more difficult at the occupied areas. That's why we don't give a lot of details about the life of our congregation in the occupied area.
Це пов'язано також з тим, що досвід 2014 року говорить про те, що бути протестантом чи католиком на окупованій території російськими військами може бути дуже небезпечно.
And from our experience of 2014 and consecutive years showed us that to be active or representative of Protestant or Catholic Church in the occupied territories can put your life and well-being to danger.
Тобто є фактори переслідування за релігійною признакою.
Because there are facts for the persecution for the religious views.
В нас знищено тільки в одній місцевості церковні будинки.
Only in one area our church buildings are destroyed or damaged considerably.
Це лінія фронту сьогодні, тому ми її не можемо навіть відбудовувати поки що.
That is now situated on the front line. That is why we cannot even start the rebuilding of those buildings.
Але загалом в Україні сотні різних релігійних організацій втратили свою церкву або повністю чи частково були знищені.
But hundreds of other churches or religious organizations have lost or had their buildings and properties very considerably damaged or destroyed.
Для нас втрата церковного будинку не є настільки важливою і травматичною, все-таки як втрата людей, тому безпека людей набагато важливіше для нас буде.
And the loss of property or buildings is not as traumatic for us as the loss of people or those who are in the parish.
Але, звичайно, як під час війни, так і під час миру, то можна розвивати навіть досить активно, релігійні організації працюють не тільки в духовній сфері, але є найбільшими активними, напевно, такими гуманітарними організаціями в Україні.
And the church organizations are one of the most active actors right now in the sphere of providing humanitarian aid in Ukraine.
І тут я, напевно, найбільше потрібно сказати, що це, власне, найбільш активні протестанти і католики.
And I would
хоча вони меншість.
That in Ukraine, the most active part of those church organizations are Protestants and Catholics.
І дуже коротко на рахунок впливу релігійних організацій на peacebuilding.
And if we talk about the impact of religious organization in the sphere of peace building,
мені видається, що ми трохи переоцінюємо роль релігійних організацій в сучасному світі.
I think we a bit overestimate the role of religious organizations in the modern world.
і авторитет навіть великих церковних лідерів.
And even the authority of great church leaders.
Ну, прикладом є того, що до патріарха Кирила було десятки різних звернень і жодної реакції.
You know, as there were many addresses to Patriarch Kirill, and there was absolutely no reaction on his side to those addresses.
Те, що церква може робити під час війни, це, напевно, якби працювати з травмою тих людей для того, щоб їх дати можливість пізніше їм пройти через процес прощення і пізніше примирення.
So what church can do now is to work with people who went through traumatic events, to help them personally to go through, first of all, forgiveness and then
І примирення.
and reconciliation.
І це відбувається.
And that is happening.
Але ви розумієте, що примирення в даний момент якби не можна конкретно працювати, тому що продовжується насилля.
But as right now, reconciliation cannot actually take place till the violence still continues.
Має закінчитись насилля.
So the act of violence should stop at first.
Має бути визнання гріхів.
There should be the admittance of sins or confession of sins.
І тільки після цього ми можемо будувати мир.
And also only after that we can enter the process of peace building.
Thank you very much. I have a question, and I don't know your name. So maybe Cornelia, we have a colleague there in the back. If you would introduce yourself first. Thank you. And then I'll call on you, Mari.
Thank you very much. I'm Igor Kuranda, an independent journalist from Poland. I have a question to Archbishop Jacquelin. The youth were especially visible today, during and after the plenary. The topic of hope is crucial for them. The future is crucial for them. And they call for, not just for action now. I understand they don't put too much faith in their elderly and middle-aged leaders. They want power. They have their delegates, they are represented, but they don't feel that they are heard enough. None of the keynote speakers is a representative of the youth. And as it was pointed out by a member of the Church of Sweden, a youth delegate, only one youth delegate was invited to deliver an address to a keynote speaker, to yourself actually. So how would you say the Lutheran World Federation can give the power to the young people? And also, how did the Church of Sweden try to do it? And also, you showed videos of children speaking about hope. Do you think it is also possible to invite children, I mean minors, underage people, to be members of, to be represented during assemblies like this one? Thank you.
Thank you. There were many questions at a time. Yeah, actually, in the panel you just witnessed, there were 2 youth and 2 elderly, because the one responder also was a youth. I mean, the LWF has worked for quite some time with this quota system. It's always at least 40% men, 40% women, 20% youth. And I can tell you that figuring out, speaking of my area, my region, the Nordic countries, it is a challenge to, if you have 6 seats, you have to have 2 youth. That's more than 20%, but 1 seat would be too little. And it is sometimes a challenge, it is, but it is a good challenge. And it is good that the LWF is quite harsh on it. It says, yes, you have to do it. And I think youth are on the committees. They share the same power as everybody. I'm not a fan of saying they need power and those who used to have power, they should have no power. Actually, the way forward is together. together and find out what we can do together. And of course we need both. We need the wild ideas that often are more frequent in young people, but they're not exclusive to young people. Even elderly people can have wild ideas. But the questions, the energy that belongs to the youth, we belong that definitely. And it becomes so clear in the climate issue. But we also need the lived history, the lived experience of those who are a little bit older. If we put those together, we will be better off than just saying we reduce power here and we increase it there. Then when it comes to participation of youth, speaking of the Church of Sweden, which you mentioned, we have since quite many years a regulation that requires all the levels, from the parish level, the diocesan level, and the national level, in decisions to make a child impact analysis. So you also need to do that. If you have budget or anything, you have to do a child impact analysis. Now people differ in how they do that. The ideal is that actually children are involved in doing this. Recently, the Church of Sweden decided about a second phase of a roadmap for climate. And in the process leading up to the decision on the roadmap, youth were involved at every step. And they have a working group in place that meets, I think, once a month to follow up on how the goals are being met. And youth are part of that. So I think there are ways where we really can give youth a voice, a collaborative voice at the table. And doing it the way that you really include the youth also for their expertise. Sometimes we take the easy way out and say, oh, we have a committee of 5, and rather than looking for one who is below 30, you say, oh, we add 1 seat to have a youth, whatever, and then the youth is only there for being a youth. I think that is a less good solution than actually looking and taking advantage of the experience of professionality that also young people bring. So that I would say is the way forward. When it comes to our future General Assemblies of the LWF, that is not for me to answer, because these are other people who will be in charge.
Thank you very much. I have a short question for both of you to wrap things up. And it is, let me begin with you, Bishop Schwartz. What is your message to the Lutheran leaders who are gathered here at the Assembly?
Насправді, це так дуже важко сказати мій меседж.
It's a very hard thing to formulate this message.
Я можу сказати те, що мені подобалось під час цієї Генеральної асамблеї.
I can only say what I really liked during the General Assembly.
Ті рідкісні моменти, коли ми говорили не тільки про великі і приємні якби речі.
Those were moments that we did not only talk about some great and nice things.
А коли ми входили також в теми табу для нас, які якби ми рідко говоримо між собою.
But when we actually spoke about a tabooed topic that rarely are spoken about.
Вони завжди такі теми є в спільнотах церковних, не тільки церковних.
Such topics always are there in the church community, not only church community.
І для мене дуже цінно, я надію, що, власне, якби ми більше будемо ще говорити на наступній асамблеї про те, чим живуть наші церкви і чим живуть наші люди в наших церквах.
And I hope that in the next assemblies we'll hear more about what the people in our local churches and congregations live by, what is their struggle.
Про ті виклики, які є в інших країнах.
Struggles of churches in other countries.
Бо мені б дуже хотілося почути, якби максимальну кількість делегатів.
Because I would love to hear more delegates speaking.
Ну і так само, звичайно, хотілося, щоб мене також почули.
And also, of course, to be heard myself as well.
Це таке моє побажання.
That's my message or wish.
It's okay. Thank you. And the same question to you, Archbishop Antje.
The question was what to say to Lutheran leaders, right?
What is your message to the other Lutheran leaders?
Well, since Martin Luther was so convinced that this is about justification by grace through faith, he could say, sin boldly. And then I would say, since we know that justification and justice belong together, we can say, hope boldly and act on it, because hope liberates to act. That's what we need.
Thank you so much, Bishop Schwartz, Archbishop Jacqueline, and our interpreter who made this possible. Let me see your Katarina. Thank you, Katarina. Much appreciated. Thank you to you for being with us today. The program continues, and this afternoon we have the Yarmark, the global marketplace, with some workshops that you should definitely check out. Then we will have a business plenary that's going to be focused on the Assembly outcomes, on resolutions, on public statements, and the Assembly message. And we will continue with that through tomorrow until we have our closing worship, which is tomorrow afternoon. The final press briefing will be tomorrow, and we will give you more information about that. There is a council meeting on Wednesday, which is the first meeting of the new council under the leadership of President-elect Henrik Stuckjer, who will be president by that time. Again, thank you for coming, and have a lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.